Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on physical activity and MS. We are thrilled to have speakers today who have experience on the research side and in the practical application of this topic. This event is part of a series of webinars hosted by the MS Society of Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today. We would also like to thank Roche for their financial support. My name is Benjamin Davis, Senior Vice President of Mission for the MS Society of Canada, and I'm very happy to be moderating this webinar from my basement here in the Halifax area. A few housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded for future viewing on our YouTube channel. No participant names or identifying information is being displayed. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the chat box on your screen. We are also streaming live to Facebook, so hello to all our Facebook Live viewers. We're glad you're here as well. Your questions are also very much welcome. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but please note that questions pertaining to specific personal situations cannot typically be answered in this venue, and we of course recommend contacting your health professional. For the webinar today, our speakers, Sarah Donkers and Lara Pilutti, have joined forces and will be presenting together. Sarah Donkers is a physiotherapist and assistant professor in the College of Medicine, University of Saskatchewan, and Lara Pilutti is an associate professor in the Interdisciplinary School of Health Sciences and leads the Clinical Exercise Physiology Laboratory at the University of Ottawa. We are thrilled they are with us today, so I will go ahead and turn the mic over to them.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we're happy for you guys to be here, and we're happy to be here. So I think, Lara, we're actually going to start with you.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Ben, and everybody for joining us this afternoon. We're really happy to be here. So Sarah and I are going to start off with some introductions, just to tell you a little bit more about our background in relation to exercise and physical activity. So as Ben mentioned, I'm a professor at the University of Ottawa. Here's a shot of our lovely canal running through the city. And our research program here in Ottawa really focuses on physical activity and exercise, understanding what are the benefits for people who are living with MS, and particularly for those as we move up the physical disability spectrum, for people who have more challenges with mobility and getting around, how we can adapt exercise to make it accessible and understand some of those benefits across the disability spectrum. So see, here are a few pictures of our pieces of equipment, looking at some fitness testing and assessment, looking at body composition. We have a scanner there that assesses lean tissue and bone, and then an electrical stimulation cycle. So we look at different adapted pieces of exercise and how they might benefit people who have limited mobility.
Awesome. And I'm Sarah. Thank you to the MS Society for hosting us, and thank you to all of you for attending. So I'm talking to you today from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I'm happy to say that for the most part, I can now pronounce that without stuttering. I'm not originally from here, but my husband is. So I'm a physiotherapist turned researcher, and it was actually my clinical work that led me into my PhD. I wanted to be able to do more for some of my clients I was working with living with MS. So my research now focuses on improving both access to and the quality of care that we can deliver for people with MS, focusing on optimizing function and quality of life. So being a physiotherapist, I like to focus on physical rehab, which includes both exercise as well as physiotherapy and different rehab interventions like symptom management and balance and walking. So you can see here in this picture, this is our lovely university campus. So we are Riverside. This is our acute care hospital. Our College of Medicine is attached to our acute care hospital. And not in this photo, but on the other side of the river is our rehab hospital, where both our MS clinic as well as our Cameco MS Neuroscience Research Cluster is located. So unfortunately, I have to walk back and forth over the river between these two places. I am fortunate to work with some of the leading Canadian researchers in MS, so Valerie Verge and Michael Levin, as well as Catherine Knox. And speaking of Catherine Knox, here I am with her, and we're celebrating one of our recent grants looking at physical therapy and exercise in MS, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later. And we are just happy to be listed on the Saskatchewan Research Milestone. And then one other study I'm doing, it's not the only study, but I mean, it involves dogs. So really, I just want an excuse to start today with a picture of a puppy. So this is Loki here. We are looking at novel ways to improve walking and balance in individuals with neurological conditions. So we use Loki to retrain that in individuals with MS. And yeah, thanks to Mira for partnering us there. Okay, so I do focus on physical activity, and that's what today is about. So what is physical activity? It can be thought of as simply activation of our skeletal muscles. So it's movement of the body. There's lots of benefits to it. It gets our blood pumping. It improves pressure relief. It puts loads through our bones. But physical activity itself, just this movement, shouldn't be confused with exercise. So exercise is a subcomponent of physical activity. Think of exercise as something that is structured, planned, repetitive, and very purposeful, right? So often we're progressing it to maintain or hit certain targets of physical fitness. So our aerobic capacity, our muscle strength, and endurance. So physical activity includes exercise, but it also includes a whole other range of activities that can be considered light intensity or moderate intensity, and sometimes even in vigorous intensity. Physical activity can also include some of our leisure time and recreational things. And I really like to emphasize physical activity as an alternative to the other end of the spectrum, which is our sedentary behavior. So there's numerous benefits to exercise, but there's also numerous benefits over any form of physical activity versus sedentary behavior. And really, we want to get that message out there and encourage individuals with MS to find ways to increase their physical activity and decrease their sedentary behavior. So sedentary behavior can be defined as any waking behavior that doesn't burn much energy, right? So it's typically sitting or lying, and we're very stationary and not exerting much effort at all. So being active and having a structured exercise program is good, but it's not the only component. And research is now showing us that finding ways to decrease sedentary behavior is an independent, important component of preventing disease.
Okay, so Sarah mentioned a few of the benefits of being active. So we're going to touch on that in a little bit more detail next here, talking about some of the evidence base, some of the research that has been done that supports why we should be exercising and why we should be active. And so this first body of evidence that I'm going to touch on is really focusing on exercise training specifically. So I've just underlined that there so that we know we're really talking about that one type of physical activity that Sarah mentioned as a subset of physical activity. So that's really where a lot of this evidence lies. So we know that there are probably the strongest evidence for the benefits of participating in exercise training when it comes to physical fitness. So things like improving your aerobic conditioning, your endurance, improving your muscular strength, those types of outcomes. So that evidence base is fairly well supported. Also, we have evidence from several reviews, quite a lot of studies showing a pretty positive effect, moderate effect on fatigue symptoms. It's really important for people who are living with MS. We know the prevalence of fatigue and the impact of fatigue on our daily living. So exercise might be one strategy for managing that symptom. Where the evidence is a little bit less strong, but also positive, is when we start to look at things like mobility outcomes. So walking, agility, getting around from place to place. Also, when it comes to balance and potentially the risk of preventing falls, also a really important outcome to think about in daily life. And then we do have some evidence looking at depressive symptoms for exercise training. It's important to note that some of this evidence hasn't necessarily been done in patients that are experiencing major depressive disorder or diagnosed depression, but rather more in terms of just the management of mild to moderate depressive symptoms. More recent evidence is starting to show for the benefits of managing pain when it comes to exercise, and a little bit of mixed evidence when it comes to quality of life from some older reviews on that as kind of an overall outcome of potential benefits of exercise. One of the areas that's received a lot of attention in recent years is the potential of exercise for managing cognitive impairment. So certainly a very prevalent and poorly managed symptom when it comes to those experienced by people with MS. Right now, the evidence base is not really strong enough for us to say that exercise training is beneficial for cognitive symptoms. We just don't have that information, but there are a lot of trials that are currently ongoing that will help us to answer those questions in the coming years. Now, if we look at the evidence, going to the next slide here for physical activity, so kind of shifting towards that middle type of activity in that spectrum that Sarah was talking about. So not so much that structured, planned exercise where a lot of that evidence comes from supervised exercise training, where somebody may be going to an exercise facility. It's led by someone who's a qualified exercise professional and very structured and prescriptive. So we've seen kind of a shift here in looking at physical activity and more lifestyle physical activity. So how we might deliver general physical activity by just changing the things that we're doing every day. So thinking about how we might change our daily routine, increasing the number of steps we might take each day, changing our activities to become a little bit more active. So there's been some interventions that have focused on this kind of approach rather than that really structured prescriptive exercise. Certainly the evidence base here is not as strong or as robust, but we are starting to see some of the benefits here for things like managing symptoms of fatigue, even mobility outcomes, some symptomatic benefits like for symptoms of anxiety and depression, cognitive improvements in certain patients, and even the potential to manage body composition. So looking at changes in things like the amount of body fat or lean tissue mass over time. So those are a different approach, a different type of physical activity intervention, and we'll touch a little bit on some of the strategies that are also used to try and incorporate that physical activity as part of your daily routine. Now, there are a lot of questions that still remain to be answered when it comes to exercise and physical activity for people with MS. One of the ones we hear a lot of the time is really, what's the best type of exercise for people with MS? So right now, we don't know, what is the best type of exercise. It's likely going to be dependent on the individual, the various different types of symptoms you might be experiencing. And we certainly need to do more research in that area to really figure out what's the best dose of exercise, what's the best intensity, how long should I be exercising for, to understand that a little bit more. A lot of the evidence too that we've seen has really been focused on the relapsing disease course, so the type of MS that most people experience. We know much less about the benefits of exercise for people who have progressive MS. Other areas that we're starting to look into more too are things like aging with MS, the pediatric MS population, looking at the benefits of exercise or physical activity in people who are experiencing comorbid health conditions, for example. So we know MS often comes along with a lot of other comorbidities. So, and those groups have often been excluded from our trials of exercise. So we need to get a better understanding of what are the benefits of exercise for everybody everyone living with MS. A hot topic right now has really been, can exercise modify the course of the disease? So this figure kind of shows a graphical depiction of the progression of the disease. And this concept that exercise might actually postpone the progression of the disease. So trying to get a better understanding of what are some of the underlying mechanisms when it comes to exercise. So can it actually be protective? Can it maybe modulate some of the inflammatory environment that's going on? So could exercise be anti-inflammatory over time? Could it be neuroprotective? And so the diagram here shows, if you look at the red bar, basically the traditional MS course. If we move down, so this is suggesting that looking at that green bar there, if somebody begins to exercise after their diagnosis, perhaps we can actually bring that progression, that kind of trajectory, bring it down in terms of the accumulation of disability. So if we think of kind of that accumulation of impairment over time, can we reduce that? And then perhaps somebody who's been a regular lifelong exerciser, so looking in that blue line, perhaps there's even greater protective effects where we can even reduce that slope or that trajectory for someone who has participated in exercise over the lifespan. So an interesting concept, and certainly something that we will be learning more about in the years to come. So the last one that I'll just touch on here is one of the greatest challenges is how we promote activity for everybody who is living with MS. We know everybody is facing different challenges to participation in physical activity and exercise. And we know levels of physical activity have remained low over time as they are in the general population. So what are some new ways that we can introduce strategies, techniques, to make exercise and physical activity more accessible and make it promote it for everybody who's living with MS. So I think Sarah's going to tell us a little bit more about some of those strategies.
Great, thank you. So as Lara said, lots of benefits, right? We should be active. Everyone should be active. And in MS, there might be several added benefits. However, we also know from the literature that knowledge of benefits alone, so education about the importance of exercise by itself, is not enough to support physical activity behavior change. And we've learned lots from qualitative research, from hearing from individuals with lived experience, so individuals themselves living with MS, that knowing you should do it and being able to do it are two separate things. And lots of studies across the world, so some in Canada, I have some listed there from New Zealand, some of the original work looking at the blue prescription and ways to implement physical activity, some work from the UK and the States, all interestingly showing that a similarity between additional concepts. So other key components of implementing physical activity include understanding elements of communication, choice, expertise, and support. So this idea of communication really says we need to continue to update not just individuals living with MS, but their care providers so that we can present a consistent and a constant messaging about the benefits of physical activity, and find ways that, as this rapidly developing area of research is giving us more insight, finding ways that we can quickly tool our healthcare providers with that information. Choice is really about the idea of having options. We know MS is a variable condition and affects each individual uniquely, but also within one individual, there's those daily and weekly fluctuations. So choice is about being able to have options, both at the exercise level, but across that physical activity spectrum. Expertise is an interesting one. And there's lots of unique factors to consider. So it's not just go be active, it's finding ways to be active that fits each individual, but finding ways to take away some of those barriers that certain symptoms that might be improved by physical activity may actually be limiting someone's ability to be active. So a lot of the research is pointing towards having people with experience in MS, as well as experience in behavioral and symptom management, paired with expertise in physical activity, being important components to helping implement these physical activity behaviors. And expertise also links to communication. So there's this idea of prescribers versus promoters. So everybody across someone's healthcare team or their circle of care for someone living with MS, it's helpful for everybody to promote this idea of physical activity. So especially family doctors and neurologists to be on board and saying, yes, you should be active. But then referring to what we refer to as prescribers. So those individuals who can help find something that actually works for you and find you ways to provide that support. So the research is also showing us that support is finding ways to continue to be active as your needs might change, and having opportunities to access ongoing support as well as peer and social support. So we can learn a lot from behavioral science that education is important, and all of this knowledge of benefits of exercise for MS are going to be very crucial in helping us tailor interventions with behavior change techniques to actually make these meaningful changes in physical activity. And lots of research pointing towards key behavioral techniques. And these are often delivered through coaching strategies. So I'll just talk about a few. Goal setting is an important one. And goal setting helps find your motivation and individualize where you should be focusing on. Because Pilates and yoga might work for one person. Going to the gym or training for an event might work for another person. Walking around the block, walking your dog, being active outdoors might work for another person, right? So goal setting to find your individual needs, but also the process of creating goals with your healthcare provider can open up the dialogue to help us understand what your current goals are and choosing a form of physical activity that'll help you meet that. Because there's benefits of all forms of physical activity. So finding one that will match you is really important. And as I always say, the best program is one someone will do. Part of good goal setting includes barrier identification. So things that might limit you from being active, as well as things that might help or facilitate you being more active. And that comes with the problem-solving approach. So this method of facilitating and co-designing a program links back to that idea of expertise. So not only do you want someone who has expertise in physical activity, finding someone who can have that experience working with MS and be able to problem solve some of those barriers with you. Okay, prompts and cues. So setting individuals up for success and creating an environment that will actually support or provide prompts and cues on how to be active throughout your daily life. Integrating into your lifestyle to help make it a habit is an important concept. And then monitoring and feedback. So finding ways to provide self-monitoring, healthcare provider or that prescriber expert support monitoring, but also feedback, right? So what are you doing well? How has it been positively impacting you? How has it been negatively impacting you, right? Especially when you're starting a new program, there might be lots of issues, a momentarily increase in fatigue or momentary increase in symptoms, and having someone to talk to about that and monitor it and modify accordingly is really important component of actually creating programs that work. And that's linked to support. So all of these behavioral strategies will help not only create programs that are more meaningful, but create habits that are supportive of lifelong physical activity levels. So we can work to not only improve your knowledge of the benefits of activity, but give you ideas on how to be active, but then also give you tools on how to monitor your own physical activity levels. So we're really working to shape that self-management component. So I just want to touch on a few recently published or currently ongoing studies, similar to what Lara said. We're going to learn a lot, really. We know a lot, but we're going to continue to learn a lot really soon, because there are some huge studies both on the benefits and potential disease modifying components of MS, but also on how can we take this information and better implement it or better get it into practice. So across that spectrum, from some sedentary behavior interventions all the way to more exercise interventions, there's a study being done called Sit Less, Move More, and this is really targeting reduction in sedentary behavior. So this study is, I think, 14 weeks long, and they first start on tooling individuals on ways to monitor their sedentary behavior and break it up with light physical activity. And then the next half of that stage process is finding ways to start to increase your light physical activity. So what's nice about this is that it's pairing that information about physical activity benefits, decreasing sedentary behavior with some behavioral techniques. Another interesting study is the Standing Up in MS. So this was for progressive MS, Jenny Freeman out of the UK, and they actually used standing frames in homes for individuals who have some severe mobility impairments from their MS. So it was targeting 140 people with progressive MS and comparing it to usual care versus using the standing frame to help improve physical activity and decrease some of that sedentary behavior. And it was statistically significant in improving some motor outcomes. Then huge studies currently underway in the States right now, and I'm talking huge. The team study has 800 people over 38 sites, and the STEP for MS study has, I think, 500 people over multiple sites. So these are both based in the States. We're going to get a lot of really good information about different methods of delivering this combined physical activity with behavioral strategies. So both of these studies are looking at supervised care versus telehealth, or minimizing some of the access barriers by using coaching through telehealth methods. And I know that's become really popular right now because of the pandemic, but this research has been in the works for a number of years prior to the pandemic, and just creating opportunities to support individuals who can maybe benefit from exercising in their home or finding ways to be active in their home, and minimizing that need to have to get into their vehicle or rely on somebody to help get them to their appointments. By the time they get there, they're maybe a little bit more exhausted versus being able to just use that time at home and get into their movement. Other approaches have been similar, where they're using web-based devices to not just deliver exercise, but also to deliver physiotherapy. So Lorna Paul has developed a web-based application specifically for individuals with MS, and this ties in a number of behavior change techniques. So there's diaries to help track your physical activity level. There's videos that you can watch, and it's actually individuals living with MS demonstrating the exercises. And then what's really nice from a physiotherapy side of it is you can use that to track how your individuals are doing and modify the program as they need to. So our research from this, the trial we ran in Saskatchewan, showed us that it's a very, very useful approach to continue to support people after we've designed their original program. And although it wasn't there to replace in-person sessions, it was really useful to help support the development of longer-term behavioral physical activity, or habitual lifestyle physical activity. And then another study that we're currently running right now, and we're super excited to get the results for, we're just approaching the 12th month mark, is combining elements of all of those things I talked about. So finding ways to decrease sedentary behavior while working towards increasing physical activity and perhaps getting to exercise at that level of exercise guidelines using expert support. But the other thing we're doing is individualizing access to that physiotherapy. So some people need in-person sessions more than others based on their current fitness level, their preferences, but also based on their rate of fluctuations or progression. So the key point here is it's an exciting time, and there's lots of efforts being made to not only increase our knowledge of the benefits of being active in MS, but actually find ways to meaningfully implement them and improve access to this information. So on that note, I think it's a really good time for us to pause for a second and do a little movement ourselves. So I'm going to share just a 2-minute clip. You're welcome just to watch it or to join along. So this clip comes from a program that we're running right now. It's called NeuroSask Active and Connected. And I'm just going to get that up. Okay, so join along if you'd like. Otherwise, just enjoy. Here's Melanie.
And shoulders back. All right, we're coming back to a piece of cardio. Bring the heat up again.
And get our heart rate moving a little bit faster. So this time we are going to be rolling our arms. So one arm around the other, hands are in a fist, feet are flat on the ground, and you're still tall. So start that roll, and then when you're feeling ready, let's pick up the pace a little bit. So you're moving as fast as you're able through your arms, still tall, long neck, and breathe, and keep going, guys. Little piece of cardio here. Keep moving, roll those arms, and relax. Drop them down. Shoulder roll back if you need it. And I'm going to challenge you here. If you're able to roll in the opposite direction, that might feel a bit like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. If this is not an option, go back the way you just did. And let's pick up our pace one more time. Quick rolling. Sitting tall, shoulders away from your earlobes, little string pulling you tall through the top of your head. Keep rolling, last few seconds, and relax. Well done, guys.
Fantastic. So that's just a small snippet of our NeuroSask program. It's targeted at individuals who have some moderate mobility impairment. So we do a seated movement class to minimize any falls risk or mobility issues. But we have a lot of people attend who are finding benefits regardless. Okay, so to summarize, there's lots of key research being done to help not only improve our knowledge of the benefits, but also our access and implementation of it. And I think these key questions are going to be better answered soon. And this knowledge of dosage, like who to do what, when, and why, I think is really going to help push implementing some of this research into place. And then I think we're going to start to be able to look at combination therapies, which is really exciting. Okay, back over to you, Lara.
Great video. Thanks, Sarah. So we'll talk a little bit about what we know in terms of this dosing, or, how much activity should we be doing? So we saw the Canadian physical activity guidelines that were specifically developed for adults with multiple sclerosis. So these were published in 2013, a few years ago now. And so what these guidelines recommend, they were published through the MS Society as well as the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, that adults with MS with mild to moderate disability need at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity 2 times per week, as well as strength training exercise 2 times per week. So this was the initial guidelines that came out. They were based on the evidence that was available at the time. And so hot off the press, we've seen some new guidelines that have recently been released for physical activity as well as, or exercise as well as physical activity for people with MS throughout the disease course. And these were just released earlier this spring. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the, why these guidelines were developed, what are some of the key differences, and some key takeaways that we might take from these new recommendations. So a few key differences is that we're not just focusing on exercise here, kind of that planned structured physical activity, but now we're bringing in this lifestyle physical activity. We've heard again from Sarah about the importance of lifestyle physical activity and exercise and kind of thinking about this entire continuum. So that was a key focus to develop these guidelines and create recommendations. So overall, what we are seeing is that more activity is being recommended because we're considering both of these types of activity here. The other thing is that we have disability-specific recommendations in that the general guidelines were, or the earlier published guidelines were recommended for those with mild to moderate disability. We've now spanned the entire disability scale, so making recommendations for those who are mobile with very limited restrictions to those who are non-ambulatory, restricted to a wheelchair, and really trying to send the message that exercise and physical activity should be recommended for everybody, and to try to find a way to make that happen through some of these recommendations. Because we are really limited in some of this evidence, especially as we move up to populations that are non-ambulatory, who experience a lot of challenges with mobility, we don't have a lot of evidence to make the recommendations there. So these guidelines are a little bit different in that they combine the evidence about what we know with some expert opinion. So a panel of experts in physical therapy, occupational therapy, exercise scientists, researchers, clinicians, all came together to put these guidelines together based on the evidence as well as their expert opinion. So a slightly different approach there. And so the evidence as they're currently published, I just want to note that these are intended for use by healthcare providers. So one of the challenges also in disseminating this knowledge or translating this information from research into practice is to develop tools like this that can be used for healthcare providers to help translate that information, and so that there is a tool there for them to use to make recommendations, to provide advice regarding exercise and physical activity. Regardless of the recommendations, we emphasize really an individualized approach as these recommendations and guidelines are delivered. Really important to take into account your own individual needs, your own abilities, where you're starting out in terms of your experience with physical activity, your fitness level, and what are your preferences for activity while ensuring that you're taking a safe approach. So what do these recommendations tell us? And I've created a little bit of a condensed version here. There's some more information available within the context of these recommendations, and we can also make those available to everybody. So we see similar recommendations here for aerobic exercise. We've increased a little bit the amount that people can do, and this is recommended for people with mild to moderate disability. I'll go into the other recommendations in the next slide. So aerobic 2 to 3 times per week at 10 to 30 minutes at a moderate intensity. So not so different there. There are also recommendations that allow for even higher intensities and higher dosages of exercise. There's evidence now supporting that that is safe and can be beneficial for those who want to participate in more activity. So resistance training would be next. So anything where we're doing kind of those pushing, pulling movements that may involve actually lifting some weights. It could be just your own body weight, resistance bands, things like that. So those are recommended 2 to 3 times per week at about 5 to 10 different exercises, trying to get an overall approach and also focusing perhaps on certain areas that may be individually challenging for you. Flexibility is recommended on a daily basis. So kind of those stretching exercises, we're trying to increase range of motion and mobility through the upper body as well as the lower body. So the recommended stretches there are 30 to 60 seconds per stretch for about 2 to 3 times each time you're doing that stretch. So that could be even things like yoga types of exercises that involve flexibility, or more kind of traditional static stretching exercises as well. And the last category that's a little bit different is neuromotor. So you might think about this as kind of balance training, coordination types of training, where we might be working on activities that help to prevent falls, for instance. So working on having that stability. There's not as much evidence to support in this area from what we know, anywhere from 3 to 6 times per week here at between 20 to 60 minutes. And so as we move up the disability spectrum, we have some specific recommendations for those, what we call the EDSS range of 7 to 9, so the expanded disability status scale. So for people with very limited to mobility, to those who are not able to stand, those are non-ambulatory. The recommendations within here range between about 10 to 20 minutes of daily exercise. Again, there's not a lot of evidence that's guiding the prescription in this area, but this is based on a lot of rehabilitation professionals, their recommendations, and what they prescribe in the clinical setting. So that 10 to 20 minutes per day, 3 times per week. And again, really an individual approach is key here. A gradual approach is key. Finding the types of exercise or the type of activity that will work for you. Accumulating activity within shorter bouts is a great way to go about doing this, to try to get that in maybe throughout the day. And also incorporating breaks is really important here too. So some of the different types of exercises that are recommended as we move into this level of disability. So breathing exercises to try to work on some of the respiratory muscles to maintain those. Flexibility, trying to increase kind of that range of motion, and that could be upper body, lower body, whatever might be available for you to do. Other upper and lower extremity exercises that may be involved, those could be more aerobic types of exercises. So it could involve some cycling of the upper body if that's accessible to you. Lower extremity things could even just be practicing movements like sitting to standing, standing for a certain period of time, or stepping exercises or steppers have become a bit more common in community exercise settings. And then core exercises to work on those muscles that are those abdominal muscles in the front of the core, as well as our back muscles to strengthen those. So it could be some seated core exercises, looking at seated balance. And important to figure out, what are the best types of exercises for you. There's a lot of different options within this range, and again, adapting as needed. So the last piece here is the lifestyle physical activity recommendations. So within this context, so this would be for everybody. The general recommendation is about 150 minutes per week of lifestyle physical activity. So this could be, work-related activity. It could be things that you're just doing around your home, more leisure type participation. It's totally up to you. So finding something that you enjoy to do is really key here. This could be an opportunity where you can look for adapted sports or activities within your community if that's something that's accessible. And then some great strategies are some of the things that Sarah's noted already, like looking at tracking tools. There's lots of great tools now, devices that we use every day that can help us to monitor activity, or even just a journal for recording activity would be great. Those cues and prompts, so maybe setting out something in your environment that gives you that cue to action, or that prompt to increase your activity or take part. And then maybe even thinking about social support. So thinking about how you can be active with your friends, with your family, engaging in that perhaps in a remote way right now could be possible. And looking at those types of strategies to try to increase that physical activity throughout the day, and in addition to your prescribed exercise. So the last piece here, we're just going to go into some challenges and solutions, and then we're happy to get into a few more questions here. So one of the things we often come across, and thinking about all of this information that we've just presented to you, exercise and physical activity information is overwhelming. How can I get started? So one of the strategies that you might think about and take away from today and some of this information is just start small. You know, you could think about something that is really simple. Maybe pick one type of activity that you'd like to change or incorporate into your routine. So starting small, try not to be overwhelmed with all of these different types of activities, but think about something that you might really like to do, that you really enjoy to do, and think about how you can just incorporate it into your routine and do a little bit more and progress from there.
Great. So another question or challenge that often comes up is around heat intolerance. So this time of year is especially hard for me with the warmer weather. How can I still be active? And there's different techniques that work for different people, but pre-cooling is often recommended. So drinking ice water, perhaps a cooling vest, or I've had participants who keep a wet cloth in the freezer. They wet it, they put it in the freezer, and then they wrap that around their neck to help. I also think it's important to not let a temporary increase in symptoms defer you or deter you from being active. It's important to monitor it and try some pre-cooling techniques, or making sure you're exercising in a cooler room. Fans are good, loose fitting clothing is good. If you do have access to a lower level in your house, that always helps as well. But using these techniques, maybe breaking up how you're exercising throughout the day is another strategy, but try not to let that be a barrier. So we do know that the temporary increase, or that momentary increase in symptoms is temporary or a pseudo exacerbation. So you can even look to support to help you monitor that.
So our next challenge comes around the accessibility of facilities and equipment. So most exercise facilities and equipment are not accessible to me, and it's challenging for me to leave my home. How can I be active in different ways? And I think this is a challenge that a lot of people are facing right now, that we've all been facing over the last 3 or 4 months now, relative to trying to learn how to be active in different ways. So we've seen a lot of really great tools that have become available. So as a starting point, you can see what you have available to you at home within your own environment. And it's a great time too to check out all of the new information that's available online. So we've seen a lot of strategies and tools that have become available to engage in online exercise sessions, videos that are available. So finding something like that works for you, and think about how that might work within the context of your own lifestyle, your preferences. And we have a number of resources that we've included as well, relative to some of those videos, some of those different online suggestions, and we'll share those towards the end.
Great. So where can I find more information or resources to help me be active on a regular basis? So we have included a number here. There is great sections on the MS Society as well. And I'm just leaving this up for a second to make sure it gets captured in the recording. So a lot of these resources are not only providing exercise and physical activity options, they're also including ways to monitor or to goal set. So they're really doing that combination that the research is showing us to be important. And then a few more resources to help you find ways to get some coaching along with your individualized programming as well.
Yeah, so some really great tools here. Participaction is a nice Canada-wide tool that's got a lot of information online. They have a blog about, no gym, no park, no problem, lots of different strategies and suggestions for how to be active in the context of the pandemic right now, as well as Get in Motion, which is a free telephone-based coaching service for adults with disabilities in Canada right now that has opened their service back up during the pandemic time specifically. So you can check out those resources as well, and a lot of great support, some videos, and other wellness videos for people with mobility challenges.
Great. So I think we hand that back over to you for questions.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much. That was just an incredible presentation, and I'm sure lots of people are nodding their heads with me along the way. So thank you for all the effort you put in, Drs. Donkers and Pilutti. This is wonderful. There have been a few questions that have rolled in, and we do have a few minutes to get to those questions. So I'll jump in and get to some of these questions. So one, Dr. Donkers, Sarah, you did speak to the overheating piece, but is too much exercise a possibility? Like, can you over-exercise? Is that something to consider?
That's definitely something we're looking at in the research right now. The general recommendation that exercise is safe, but don't go out and run a marathon tomorrow, especially if you haven't been exercising. It really is learning to gradually add load and to monitor your symptoms. And there is still lots of unknowns, right? It's not like, okay, exercise is now, the holy grail. I do think it's a magical pill, and there's so many benefits to it. But there is still some unknowns. So what I can say is listen to your body, do a structured program, start to monitor, right? Did you have flare-ups of symptoms? How long did it last for? If you do have any concerns, or if you are thinking of increasing it to what you might think is a really high level, then those are great scenarios to look for support in. But that's what we're trying to figure out, right? And we also don't know dosage wise. So, you increase and you get lots of benefits, but we don't know if that plateaus, right? So if you're active, say 150 minutes a week, and you get lots of benefits opposed to not being active at all, but then, you're active 200 and that the benefits to time ratio may decrease. We don't know yet. I don't know. Lara, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely great. Listening to your body, you're the best judge of your own physical activity experience, and knowing your symptoms and knowing yourself. So progress always gradually, and listen to your body.
One of the questions that came in was related to whether or not one should do physical activity during a relapse. Any comment on that? And that question was from Facebook.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one, and one where the evidence is really quite limited. So I think the challenge there is that there's a lot of things going on within the nervous system during the time of relapse. And we can see this as a period of where there's inflammation, the nervous system is really plastic, it's adapting. And so we are sometimes cautious, or some might be cautious in that this is a period of time where we could introduce additional stress to an already stressed system. But it also might be a time where this is kind of a window of opportunity where we could promote positive adaptations and positive repair. There's very little evidence. There's a few trials that have been done, and a recent one that was looking at an acute bout of exercise during the relapse period. And it did not show a pro-inflammatory response. So in that it didn't induce additional inflammation, but we don't have enough evidence to conclusively say right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We often say, from a rehab perspective, it's an okay time to step back from your more structured exercise, but you want to try and stay somewhat active, right? So don't just go to pure sedentary behavior. If that's what you need momentarily to help with coping, but a long period of sedentary behavior during a relapse often leads to a decrease in function. So in addition to the relapse, you're going to get some disuse atrophy, and we want to try and minimize that. So I encourage you to still throughout the day, try and sit up, practice transfers, do seated movement stuff. So still do your light physical activity, but maybe step down from your more intense exercise. And stay tuned while we learn more about that.
Wonderful. And I'd like to highlight that the resources that you've listed, and also referencing these really interesting, exciting guidelines, is really useful. And for those who are tuning in, watching this, know that this webinar will exist for quite some time on our site. So you can go back through this and write down whatever you've missed, etc. The information will be accessible to you for quite some time. This was an interesting question that came through, and I guess it relates to thinking about specialists. If someone has a question regarding body movement or a particular issue regarding body movement, is there an opinion? I know this is kind of a loaded question perhaps, but is there an opinion related to whether or not one should go to a chiropractor versus a physiotherapist versus another specialist? Is there a school of thought around how to pick one of those? And the answer
if you have someone that works well with you already, stick with that. Like my recommendation is nowadays it's less about the healthcare professional training, and it's more about their knowledge and experience in working with MS. And so I'm a physiotherapist, but I've had a caseload of people that when I go on holidays, I hand over to an exercise therapist as opposed to another physical therapist. So really, it's trying to find someone who has that works well with you. So if you have an existing relationship, and then trying to find someone who has a bit of experience and up-to-date information. And I always tell my clients as well, it can be a two-way street, right? So if you have that good relationship, but maybe they don't have the information, you can advocate and share resources that you're aware of with them.
Great. And one of the questions just came in, I think, in follow-up to that in some respects. Are all PTs trained to assist MS patients? And if not, is there a way that you can navigate to find someone who is specifically trained in MS?
No. We're working on it. We're working on trying to create a database on, like one of my big projects is trying to implement this rapid increase in research that we know of, and trying to implement that readily available to healthcare providers. I should say that as physiotherapists, you can specialize in neuro rehab. So that would be someone good to try and find. There's neurospecific clinics, both publicly and privately. But the majority of people in physiotherapy specialize in musculoskeletal, and they may not have experience with MS, but we do exist. And yeah, Lara, I don't know from a kinesiology or exercise therapist standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree, same kind of thing. And I think that's hopefully that's come across in the presentation today, is the importance of developing these tools and strategies that can translate more of the research into practice for a variety of different healthcare professionals that some may not see patients with MS regularly, some might, but the more of these tools that we can develop and translate, then we can better equip those clinicians.
Wonderful. I'm noting our time, and so I have time for one more question. And perhaps, Lara, this is for you. Are you able to provide any examples of neuromotor activities? I think it's in reference to the guidelines.
Yeah, so any kinds of balance types of training, this could, a lot of variety of different things. So this could be within your yoga class. There's some recommendations or some studies that have even been done on Tai Chi, Pilates. more traditional just balance training that you might see in rehabilitation. So Sarah can maybe comment on some of those that you might do for balance that's more related to fall prevention. Any of those types of activities would fall within that category.
Great, great.
Yeah, so things that are stressing your neuromotor system, right? So in addition to just strengthening exercises or cardio exercises, which often in individuals with neurological conditions, those tend to be done with least affected parts of their body so that we can work at higher intensities, like get your heart rate up, lift a higher load. Neuromotor often is about moving into your challenges or moving into your limitations. And we want to safely find ways to challenge those limitations. So coordination exercises, balance exercises, often like your therapeutic exercises fall into that. And then Tai Chi, yoga, Pilates, those are great examples. And they're really multifaceted interventions, but they have that element of mind, body connection, and paying attention to how you habitually move in compensation for maybe some of your MS, your impairments due to MS, versus how you have the potential to move by increasing that awareness and challenging your impairments.
Gotcha. Thank you. Well, this has been just a wonderful webinar. Thank you to you both for your time and effort and everything you've put into this. I think everyone who's tuned in and who will tune in at a future time will get a lot of use out of this. So thank you so much. And one of the comments I wrote down was the best program is one that someone will do, right? So that's well said, well said. So if I may, before we close, I'd like to remind everyone to check out msbike.ca, www.msbike.ca. Our signature bike event is coming up and going virtual this year as bikers will be uniting online. So join folks from across Canada as they hit the road and take to the stationary bike and virtually connect for a unique and fun cycling experience. I also want to remind you about the MS Society of Canada's Knowledge Network, which is staffed by trained navigators to answer questions related to MS. You can see on the slide how to connect with them through phone, email, live chat, etc. We also have a peer support program. This is a telephone and email program for individuals living with MS and also for caregivers and loved ones of people with MS. Please contact us if you would like more information. Please remember the recordings of all our recent Hear from the Experts webinars, including those focused on COVID-19, are available through the webinar and the COVID-19 sections on our website and on our YouTube site. A final reminder that you will be receiving a survey following the webinar, and I hope and I encourage you to fill it out to let us know if this information was valuable to you. So again, thanks very much to our speakers. Thanks to everyone who's tuned in on Facebook or joined us on the webinar here. It was great to have you. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.